Hi, I'm Funmi Fetto. This is On Reflection, the beauty podcast with a global view on beauty, in association with Sunday Riley, certified B Corp, cruelty-free skincare, powered by science, balanced by botanicals. Later in the show, I'm joined by the award-winning journalist and author Alice Hart-Davis. We'll be talking about her new skincare book, as well as injectables and ageism in the beauty industry. But first, required reading, where we discuss beauty news topics and features that have caught our attention. Joining me is Tamazin O'Connor, the Senior Associate Reporter at the Business of Fashion. Tamazin, welcome.
Hello, Funmi. Thank you for having me.
I love all the stories that you chose for this week. The first one is by Liz Flora at Glossy. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is beauty Instagram's post-election star. And then we have another piece that kind of ties into that, which is a beauty piece also related to Kamala. And it's written by Sonia Harrier, who's the beauty director of The Telegraph. The woke belief that women can't be interested in politics and beauty is hopelessly out of date. This story was actually in response to the backlash she faced regarding a beauty story that she wrote on Kamala Harris when it was announced that Biden had crossed the 270 mark. I've got lots of thoughts on both stories for different reasons. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on them.
I think Liz Flora's Glossy story, it raises the interesting question of beauty brands weighing in on politics and questions around activism and how far brands should be involved in activism. I think for brands, activism pays off, but it can be easier for smaller brands to navigate, especially if their roots are on social media and they have a history of activism or weighing in on political issues, as the article kind of points out, or even if they have a strong founder and personality behind them, where fans are buying into a founder's personal brand. But what I also thought was quite interesting was that it can backfire as well. We know that this election has been very divisive, and the article talks about the benefit facing backlash from Trump supporters, and that kind of balance that brands have to grapple with, taking a stance versus potentially alienating a consumer base, I think is very interesting, especially when you kind of think about just how divisive this recent election has been.
I think it's such a good point you raise, because that was exactly my thought. The question it raised for me, whether beauty brands or any brands really should be non-partisan. And my opinion, perhaps controversially, is yes, I think they should be. I've always said that brands should be political in terms of, standing for something, whether it's a moral or ethical or human stance. But I do think as brands, yes, they should encourage us to vote. That's a very important thing to do, of course. But I don't think they should be telling us who to vote for. I don't know if that's a brand's place to do that. And you mentioned Benefit, and I quite liked their stance on this. They were one of those brands who stayed non-partisan, but they celebrated Kamala's win as the first Black South Asian vice president, because as one of the directors, I think it was Angela Picaro, said, it's a historic moment for all of us to rally around. And I agree with that, but a lot of brands were criticised for that. Benefit got flack from Trump supporters, but their response to that was that they keep their Instagram, and I quote, an open forum where people can share their thoughts while removing hate speech. And I do think that that's really important. I really, really do. If we say that we're a democracy and people have that freedom of speech, and also freedom in terms of who they vote for, because that's also really important, to allow people that freedom, whether you agree or disagree with it. I think that freedom is a huge part of what we hold dear as a so-called democracy. So I think those things are really, really important.
Totally. I mean, that's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Black Lives Matter protests catapulted the conversation around race and racial inclusion into the forefront of the cultural conversation. I think that Kamala's heritage is another huge milestone of just having not just a woman, but a woman of colour as VP-elect. And that's where it is interesting to celebrate her win as a woman of colour versus her win as a Democrat.
Yes, I think that's the point they were making as well, that they're celebrating all of those things, but it's not so much to do with whether she's a Democrat or whether she's a Republican. And I think that was a really important point to make. This whole conversation around politics and beauty is something that's actually come up quite a lot on this podcast. Like the main person that we've been talking about in the context of this is AOC, and how rather than enabling her critics to use her love of makeup to diminish her, she actually weaponizes it.
That's so cool. I think exactly like that kind of Telegraph comment, the idea that women can't be interested in politics and beauty is, in fact, hopelessly out of date. Beauty has become such a part of the way people express themselves culturally on Instagram, how they present themselves on social media, how they talk with their friends, what brands they buy into, what their brands that they buy into stand for. And I think that to then kind of segue beauty as an industry into a little corner and say, well, yes, but it's not serious. And we can't talk about beauty and makeup seriously. This idea that you can't be feminine and you can't enjoy beauty products and makeup and be a serious politician and be a serious journalist, I think is very antiquated.
Yes, completely. This is why I love what AOC does, where she'll happily share her favorite lipstick and her contouring steps in the same breath where she talks about women's rights and other important social and political issues. I just love the way she owns it. I mean, a lot of the criticism that was thrown at Sonia for her piece in The Telegraph, interestingly, came from a lot of other women who deemed her feature as anti-feminist. At the end of the day, the piece that Sonia wrote, it wasn't a sort of silly piece of fluff saying, oh, look at her pretty blusher. It was so much more than that. It was looking at how the way you wear makeup as a woman, especially as a powerful woman in a male-dominated arena, sends out certain signals and can actually be a power move. And acknowledging that there are these nuances to makeup that go so much deeper than the superficial. It doesn't belittle Kamala Harris, and I'm sure she would have been quite intentional about her makeup choices. She would have thought about that, surely.
Oh, yes, 100%. I think the other thing to remember is that on Twitter, our lovely friend Twitter, where, you don't have that many characters and you scan a headline and don't necessarily read a piece. And obviously, the Telegraph is behind the paywall. I think that perhaps there was also a lot of taking the headline to reflect the whole story without actually reading the content. But also, as Sonia points out in her piece, it's interesting when you think about newspaper journalism translated to the internet, because when, that Saturday copy of The Telegraph was delivered to all its readers, it was Kamala Harris, all these different features throughout the paper before you get to the beauty section and have that beauty take. And so kind of taking it out of context and using this as a standalone representation for the paper's take on this moment in history, it's a tricky one.
There was one element actually in the glossy piece that did make me think, okay, this is what makes people angry about picking up on how a woman wears beauty when she's trying to deliver what others will deem as a much more important message. There was a line in the glossy piece that kind of made me cringe slightly. A brand founder said something like, oh, her lashes were on point. And I don't know, maybe it's out of context, but that is the kind of stuff that I personally find reductive. And I think that's the kind of thing a lot of people take issue with. I guess it's just wanting a semblance of balance. But I don't think Sonia's piece was imbalanced at all. Let's go on to the Refinery 29 piece by Jacqueline Kilikita. And it's called, Is Made-to-Order Skincare the Answer to Beauty Sustainability Problem? This touches on quite a few things aside from sustainability in and of itself.
I thought that idea of personalization was interesting, but I don't think it's a sustainability question. My take is it's more of an issue of the skincare market is booming, it's growing, it's an attractive opportunity, but it's also so crowded. And on top of that, consumers are more savvy than they ever were before. Cute branding isn't enough. Your product has to work, especially if you're charging a premium price point, given the caliber of products brands like The Ordinary and, Inky List are offering for budget-friendly prices. On the sustainability side, as we kind of read the piece, there are a couple of issues. It's the levels of consumption, which is kind of, the consumer side, and how products are made and packaged, which is kind of the brand's responsibility. And my personal opinion is I don't think that a personalized skincare routine addresses either of these specifically. I think just because products are tailored to your skin's needs doesn't mean that you're automatically going to buy fewer products or use fewer products. And I think also, given there are some brands that, you can take a test when you go onto their website, and then they will recommend the whole regime and suite of products for you. To my mind, a consumer that's kind of faced with, okay, so to work for my skin, I need to buy 1 product, 2 product, 3 product, 4 product, 5 product, and that's all I need, versus perhaps flicking through a magazine or seeing one product on Instagram and thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to try that. It actually might even possibly promote more consumption. But also, I think it's important not to forget that beauty is a repeat purchase. So even if you kind of narrow down your skincare consumption, you're still going to be purchasing these products over and over. And so I would argue that actually the packaging is much, much more important when you think about this beauty sustainability question.
I completely agree. I think the problem is so much more convoluted than that. There has to be an element of realism when thinking about this. Essentially, beauty consumers, they are always looking for that holy grail, aren't they? And so in order to find and discover that holy grail, they keep on buying more products. And then to meet that need, brands keep on making more products and selling more products so they can meet that need, but also stay in business. I wrote a piece in British Vogue a few months ago, actually, about the rise of the single product brands who have a less is more approach. Brands like You Beauty, Augustina, Beda, Summer Fridays, etc. But eventually, even these brands who came to the market with one single hot product, they eventually have had to introduce more products into their brand portfolio because their customers demand it. They want to stay in business. So what do? That doesn't help with the sustainability question. That's almost like a whole big question in and of itself.
Totally. And I think that this idea of product personalization gives a brand much more of a marketing tool. You're getting this product bespoke for you, specifically for your needs. And to me, that's not got really anything to do with sustainability beyond it comes in friendly packaging or the ingredients are eco-friendly, but that could be any product. Conversely, mass production could actually help pass on more benefits to the customer and also help smaller brands deal with some of the costs that come with more sustainable packaging. So, for example, economies of scale help brands keep costs down. So choosing the compostable bag over the cheaper bag won't put such a strain on margins if you are actually selling more product. I mean, it also would give a brand more room to play with higher quality ingredients if they decided to invest the kind of higher margins that they reap from creating more products that way.
The difficulty with that, I guess, is that if it becomes more expensive, then you're prohibiting quite a huge section of society from buying into that. And so then you lose the whole conversation around sustainability, because if you only have a tiny proportion of the market buying into it, then it's not really having as great as impact as you want it to have.
There's always going to be a trade-off for beauty when it comes to sustainability. So depending on what the brand is, where they're based, what they're producing. I mean, when you think about like the glass versus plastic debate, if you are a local brand that makes your products in the UK and only distributes in the UK, then bottling everything in glass is, of course, a lot more sustainable than using plastic. But if you are making your products in China or Korea and then shipping them to the US and then packaging them and shipping them all the way around the world, actually plastic might make more sense, because the freight emissions that come from transporting that glass, the risk of the glass being broken as it's being transported from A to B, there's all those kinds of issues that arise. And then when you think about, safety concerns, so for a facial product, a glass bottle, that's fine because you're using it by the sink. But if you're talking about body products, I don't know, for the shower, then a glass bottle might be dangerous. So I think that it's so much more of a complicated discussion than just straightforward, this is sustainable and this is not sustainable. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution for the beauty industry.
Let's go on to our final piece by Jessica DeFino, who was actually my guest last week. She's written a piece in the New York Times called, "Is This the End of the Manicure?"
So the first thing that kind of popped up when I read this story was that I just thought it was so interesting to see how the concept of health has infiltrated our routines that actually really have nothing to do with our health in the most simplest terms. And when you think about spending more on skincare over makeup, spending on supplements, focusing on your mental health and your well-being, that's quite an obvious one. But there are a lot of new products coming out into the market that are emphasizing health and cleanliness and hygiene and, disease prevention in their marketing. Immunity is like the new beauty buzzword in the supplements world, and lots of brands that produce products that tout scientific claims and expert advice. I just thought it was so interesting how now nail wellness is the next iteration of that, in the same way that maybe you're swapping out your kind of more bold makeup that you'd wear on a Saturday night out on the town for more muted makeup that emphasizes a healthy glow rather than looking caked or dolled up, and it's about a healthy complexion. Now that that's also translated to the nails, I just find it really fascinating.
Looking at the journey our relationship with nails and having our nails done took once the pandemic set in, the piece talks about how in our first lockdown, there was this mad panic that fueled a lot of at-home tutorials. And I even noticed myself, I saw that the Google searches for, how to give yourself a manicure and how to remove gels and acrylics and all of that all went through the roof. And now it's completely calmed down because people are realizing that actually they're quite happy not having the pressure of having their nails done. And I am one of those people because, to be honest, it's not even something I really enjoy at all. I didn't even do my nails at home. I was just like, right, I'm not even going to bother with this. But it was quite telling that in the piece, there was a celebrity manicurist, Maz Hanna, who said that if she wasn't a manicurist, it's likely that she wouldn't wear nail polish again. And she said, and I quote, "Women have kind of relaxed the beauty standards society have been forcing on them for so long." And I think there is some truth to that. I've seen so many people who have allowed themselves to go grey, deciding to no longer do Botox. They've embraced underarm hair. So I think that's all part of that whole thing of not feeling that you have to be done.
I think it will be interesting to see what happened in a year's time. And I think that it's also interesting to think about how quickly and whether we will go back to normal.
I think, yes, we can't necessarily see things right now, but I look at the nail industry and I remember probably maybe even as recent as early last year, I remember receiving nail polishes and just asking myself, who wears nail polishes at home? Who does their nails at home anymore? Because at that point, I didn't know anyone who did their nails at home. Everyone was having their nails done in the salon. And then this pandemic came along and the boost to the at-home polishes and kits and so on has been astronomical. There is another side to this piece. This piece talks a lot about toxic nail formulations and certain processes that are damaging for nail health. And yes, there were some elements of this piece that were quite damning. And there were some backlash from people in the nail industry claiming that in a time where the pandemic has really negatively impacted beauty businesses, this is the last thing they really want to hear. It's not great for them. But I think we have to hold on to the importance of writing things as we see them and exploring lots of different elements of beauty and the industry, even if they're not necessarily that popular with other people.
Utterly, completely. That's so important. It's at the heart of good journalism, is being transparent and honest. And it's not Jessica DeFino's job to do the nail industry's PR for them. You have to give a balanced view. And I personally can't speak to whether there are a lot of toxic chemicals in a lot of these formulations. I don't know much about that. But if there are, then if that's a conversation, an argument that's being had at the moment, then of course it's important to give all sides.
I totally agree with you. And she has said, even though it's quite tongue-in-cheek, but she does say that she's setting out to destroy the beauty industry, but only so she can rebuild it again. Tamizan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been amazing having you.
Well, thank you for having me, Funmi.
It's now time for In Praise Of. This is a segment of the show where we laud the merits of a single beauty product. This week, it's Sunday Riley's Pink Drink Firming Resurfacing Essence. Hallelujah. I'm going to give you a mini science lesson. I hear that intake of breath. Please don't worry. I pretty much failed science at school, so trust me, this is going to be quite basic. So here we go. Microbiomes. This is the word of the moment in skincare. It relates to the genetic ecosystem of bacteria and fungi and viruses that live on your skin. Yes, I know, it sounds so disgusting, but believe it or not, this is actually quite a good thing. Think of it as a protective layer. It's the protective layer that keeps your skin healthy, it keeps your skin happy, and basically it stops your skin from acting bonkers. Thanks to an excessive and aggressive skincare regime, environmental aggressors, stress levels, and all the joys of modern life, most people at some point or another have bonkers skin. All those flare-ups, the acne, the flakiness, the breakouts. More often than not, it's all down to a dodgy microbiome. The point of Sunday Riley's pink drink, essentially a power drink for your skin, is to help restore your microbiome so your skin starts acting sane again. And yes, I know there are lots of products out there right now that claim to do that, but I have to say this one stands out for a number of reasons. The formulation, which includes ingredients such as fermented honey, pink yeast, I love the sound of pink yeast, peptides, ceramides, and kelp, is not just brilliant at restoring the skin, it also resurfaces the texture of your skin, and it includes this powerful antioxidant from green tea to fight the signs of aging. Thankfully, it doesn't do this at the expense of your skin's health. The fact that it's an essence, oh my goodness, let's talk about that. That is everything for me. I am obsessed with essences. They are basically water-like textures that drench the skin in hydration without feeling like your pores are being clogged to death. And this one is so good. So much so that it's joined my category of products that I call, I love it so much, I could drink it. And you'll probably be tempted too, especially as it's actually called a drink and it looks like pink lemonade. But for best results, I'd save it for your skin. Now, this week's Talking Points, my guest is Alice Hart-Davies. She's the award-winning journalist and author of the Tweakment Guide to Start with Skincare. She joins me today to talk about her new book, Injectables and Ageism in the Beauty Industry. Alice, welcome to the show.
Hi, Funmi. Fantastic to be here.
Now, I want to talk about your frankly brilliant book. It is so detailed. It has everything from ingredients to products to skincare tips to dealing with various issues, whether it's rosacea, wrinkles, acne, dry skin, everything. And it's £10. That's incredible value. But this isn't your first book. A lot of people who haven't heard of you don't know that you're the queen of tweakments. That's what we call you in the industry. Your first book was about tweakments. I'd be interested to know why you didn't do it the other way around, why you didn't start with a skincare book first before going into tweakments.
I had written a couple of skincare books with my daughters when they were young teenagers. And after that, I thought, now I need to move on to writing about skincare for adults. And I didn't get much encouragement from people in the publishing industry who I asked. They would say, unless you are writing with a celebrity co-authoring, or unless you're the Vogue Book of Beauty or something, why is anyone going to listen to you about skincare? So I was very easily put off. But I started chipping away at this book a long time ago, and I couldn't kind of think how to present it. And it was called The Beauty Rules, and that all felt wrong. And then I realized, because I've been writing about skincare and tweakments, as I call cosmetic procedures, for about 20 years now. And that had always been very much a minority interest. There's such a stigma about it. Everyone's very sort of reluctant to talk about tweakments. But that all seemed to be changing round about 4 years ago. And then about 3 years ago, I suddenly became convinced that the time was right to write a book about tweakments. So I shoved the skincare aside and went on to do the tweakments. After I'd done the tweakments book, and that came out last year, I thought I must pick it up again and dust it off, because there's so much interest in skincare now. In beauty writing, it's always been the boring cousin to makeup, which is the exciting stuff. But in the last few years, people do seem to be much more interested in having the knowledge about skincare and knowing why they should be doing what they're doing to their skin. And that was what I wanted to try and explain with it. So I think maybe that's why there's so much detail in there.
One of the things that I found incredible about you is that you were one of the first, maybe perhaps even the first person I knew within the industry who was incredibly open about treatments they were having. And I wanted to know, as someone who's been in the industry for so many years, an industry that is obsessed with youth, did you start having tweakments because you felt pressure to look a certain way?
I mean, that sounds like the logical way it should be, but it wasn't really like that, because I'd been a journalist for about 15 years before I moved into writing about beauty, skincare, tweakments and stuff. I was writing for the Evening Standard, London-based, very keen to be in with all the latest, whatever's going on, what are people doing, what are the doctors up to. The features editor was mad keen to know what all these doctors who were offering lasers and injectable toxins and skin peels, what they were actually doing, where they were based, who they were. And I was sent out to find out. So I sort of blundered into it from a purely journalistic, sort of curious point of view. And of course, when you don't know this area at all, it's all a bit scary. I mean, it's completely terrifying because they're doing stuff that you don't really understand until you get to know the technologies and what these things can do, how they work. Also, I was absolutely the right age to start looking at all this because I was in my late 30s. I had 3 small children, full-time job, and I was absolutely exhausted. And there comes a point where when you've been writing about Botox and stuff for a couple of years and you are constantly being offered procedures, I wasn't very keen to take them up at first because you just don't know what they're going to be like and nobody's doing them. It's all a bit unusual. And then you look in the mirror and think, actually, would it be so bad? Let's just see what this can do. And because I was, well, that's kind of how it is. And because I was writing for the papers and reporting on these procedures, yes, I have been open about it from the start, just because that was one of the reasons I was doing it, in order to say how it was. So I've never really felt the need to hide what it is I'm doing. The thing is, there has been, and there still is to a large extent, this enormous stigma around treatments, around having any kind of help, invasive procedures, non-invasive procedures.
Why do you think there is still a stigma attached to having these kind of treatments done? You've always been very open about it.
It's a combination of things. I think there's still a very strong, it could be a sort of old-fashioned kind of puritanism about looks that feels it's wrong, it's cheating. And then there's the way we've all seen pictures of people who've had treatments go wrong, who've overdone it, celebs who've completely wrecked their faces and ended up looking really weird. So there's the fear of not wanting to look like that. The thing is, there's such a sort of lengthy continuum of stuff you can do to improve your looks, and everyone has a sticking point somewhere along that. And what I mean is, we're all happy with people using makeup. That's not kind of contested now. Skincare and makeup, basic starters. Then colouring your hair, which 30 years ago we'd all lie, no, I haven't had highlights, it's just a bit of sunshine. And then there's cosmetic dentistry, which now is much more accepted as a sort of fairly normal thing, to have your teeth straightened or whitened than they would have been 20 years ago. And then there's all the procedure stuff. There's like elaborate facials, maybe with a bit of a skin peel on them, or the energy treatments that help sort of resurface and tighten the skin. A lot of people are okay with those, but when it gets to needles, I always think needles is the sticking point. People don't like the idea of having anything put into their face with a needle, whether it's fillers that would reshape the face or replace lost volume, or toxins. The whole word toxins kind of says a lot of it about why people don't like it, even though injectable toxins for relaxing wrinkles are one of the best proven and sort of safest things out there in terms of all these procedures. So somewhere along that line will be a place where everybody's comfortable with, and they won't like the thought of going further, and they'll judge people who do go further quite harshly for it. Up until lockdown, I was running events for people who are curious to explore a bit more about this whole world of tweakments, and even people who are within my immediate audience, so they know that I write about these procedures, they know I have these things done, and that if they come to an event where there will be a lot of fantastic doctors they could meet and have a chat with about what they'd be interested in trying, or if they want to explore the kinds of technology available in this area, even when they've come to an event like that and paid for a ticket, they are very cautious about being seen to be there. You know, if I go around trying to do vox pops, they'll say, oh, no, not me. This is a very secret mission. My daughters would kill me if they knew. Nobody can know I'm here. So there's still that internal conflict about the whole idea of using something further than makeup and skincare to improve the way they look. And yet the desire to do something about it is very strong for a lot of them.
Tell me, you have done pretty much everything when it comes to Tweak Men's. Every time I'd meet you, there's always some new procedure you're talking about, or something that you've just done and something you're recovering from. And I wondered whether, since you've been doing it for so long, yes, you started your journey into injectables and these procedures from the standpoint of an investigative journalist. Now, however, would you say that you're addicted? Do you think that they're addictive?
I think they can be addictive. There's certainly a slippery slope, because when you see what these procedures can do by the way of brightening up your skin, refreshing the way you look, taking away the aspects of fatigue or sadness, or all the kind of muscle wasting and fat loss that goes on just as a normal part of the aging process, then that's what becomes addictive, thinking, this has made me look that bit brighter, I like this. But it's really crucial to to know when to stop, or to have somebody who will tell you very clearly if you've gone too far with any of these things. We all know what it looks like when people don't have people around them to tell them when to stop, or doctors who don't. And you get those kind of overworked celebrity faces that look just kind of plastic. So I don't think I'm addicted to it, but then I might find it quite hard to stop. I mean, I was very happy not to have anything done during all the months of lockdown. But then anybody who's observing what I actually do on a month by month basis might beg to differ. But then it's kind of part of my work now to try new things and to report on how they are.
Someone put it quite well when they said, can't remember who it was, who said, Alice tries everything so we don't have to. So you try everything on our behalf. So we don't have to go down that route. And then we can make a decision whether we want to or not. I wanted to also ask, we're in an industry whereby youth is lauded. You know, there's no two ways about it. And whether as you're growing older and still in the beauty industry, you're feeling an increasing level of pressure to look a certain way. I know that's not what inspired you to start doing this kind of work or procedures, but I just wonder whether that's playing into you carrying on with the work that you're doing, and how it ties into the conversation around ageism and aging well or aging naturally. And I put all that in inverted commas because, of course, all of that is subjective.
Do I feel more pressure? No, but I think my own standards of what I should look like are maybe becoming a bit distorted, which I realize when I'm talking to people about procedures that have been suggested to me, or what certain practitioners have said I ought to try next. And I say, well, if you look at this bit here, and I see them looking, and then I take a look at myself through their eyes and think, it's not exactly a big problem, get a grip. So I'm very aware of that. And yeah, people are very keen to say it's much better to age naturally. That is a very popular mantra, and that's what people like. But, you know, there is nothing graceful about aging naturally. You know, we lose bone from our faces, we lose fat from the fat pads, the skin sags and drapes lower, the fat collects under the jaw, and it's very natural, but it's not a great look. And I suppose it's just having the opportunity to try these procedures and to tackle those various aspects of aging. I'm very keen to keep doing it, if that doesn't sound too mad. I think this is absolutely what you're asking, isn't it? Will I give up at 65? You think from where I am, I'm 57 now, I think 65 is only just around the corner. I'd like to say, yes, of course, I'll have evolved so much as a person, I won't feel the need to do all of this, but I'm sure I won't have.
I have to say, I love your honesty about this, because this is something that I think a lot of women are conscious of how they're aging, but it's not something they really like to vocalize because it feels
like we shouldn't, doesn't it? It feels that we're supposed to accept it. As to being still in the beauty industry, I'm just amazed and amused and delighted by it the whole time, because when I started writing about the beauty industry, finding out all about it, 40 was pretty much the upper limit, and it was known there was one or two very famous older beauty writers in their 50s, but it could never be said they were in their 50s and they were going to lose their foothold one day because they were far too old. Now there's a whole bunch of us who are proceeding rapidly through our late 50s and who are still taken seriously by the industry, and we have an audience of people our own age, and I've been thrilled by the group I've picked up on Instagram, who are a fabulous lot, and they are very curious about what I do with my face. It isn't for all of them, but it gives them ideas. It just gives you the option of how to manage your looks as you age. That's what the Tweakments business does. And it's just not an option we've had before. You know, we've always had as women to accept that we will fade and diminish and whatever, and that unfortunately that seems to account for our value as well as our looks, because youth is so fetishized, because our looks are so intrinsic to how we're perceived. The idea of the wise old woman is not a strong one in our society, is it? And for all that we love it to be. What I love is when I get people coming back to me and saying that they appreciate my work because, you know, they are powering on through their 50s, they work in a young industry, they dress the part, their mind is as sharp as ever, they have a great haircut, they have great makeup, but they would still have people in their team talking about them teasingly, not that funnily as the professor or granny or whatever, and they have a few tweakments. It just helps give them that edge. They look in the mirror, they feel more the parts that they want to be. Other people take them more seriously, which shouldn't be as it is, but that is how it is, and that makes them feel more powerful in what they're doing. And you think, great, that is all it should be. And it is different for everybody, because, you know, some people say, oh, what are the things everybody should have done? And you think there's nothing that anybody should have done, and one person's concern is something that another person wouldn't notice.
Do you believe that in order for a woman to age in a certain way or age best, she needs to have a combination of both tweakments and good skincare?
Skincare is absolutely fundamental. Nobody needs tweakments. They are a choice. They are icing on the cake. But skincare, I really would say, is hugely helpful, because it's all about skin health, isn't it? It's not just prettification. It's about getting your skin to function well, to be that barrier between yourself and the outside world, which is what it's there to do. And we end up compromising that barrier by washing too much, or being exposed to the weather, or taking our makeup off wrong, or trying out, you know, new skincare ingredients that are maybe a bit stronger than we thought. So learning to manage your skin and getting it into a happy place and nurturing it so that it can have that spring and bounce and general glow of health to it, I think that is the way fundamentally to look good as you age. We judge each other simply from an evolutionary perspective. You know, we judge each other really quickly on how we perceive somebody else's skin. There have been loads of fab studies done on this that show our eye is incredibly good at picking up the level of pigmentation and the variations in pigmentation, sort of roughness and weathering on a skin, even if it's an image of skin that's been draped over a uniform model, so that you can tell whether somebody's 10 or whether they're 70. We're universally pretty good at that. So if we keep our skin in good order, it gives out a signal that we are feeling fresh, aging successfully, however you'd like to put it.
What do you think are the biggest skincare myths out there at the moment?
Oh, so many. What really annoys me is the way people go on about certain ingredients being toxic. There are no toxic ingredients in skincare. Skincare is incredibly carefully regulated as an industry. Everything that's used in a product needs to be safe. The product is subject to all sorts of regulations.
You say there are no toxic ingredients in skincare, but surely that doesn't relate to skincare globally. We know that there are other products that are produced that aren't under EU regulations that can be potentially toxic.
Yeah, I was talking about the people who are looking at skincare in the UK, where it is tightly regulated. It's just that there's a lot of talk around ingredients that have been well accepted in skincare for a long time being extremely problematic, which they're not. So that's one thing that really bothers me. Then there's the fact that a lot of people still think that there are magic bullet products, as it were, that there's going to be one thing that will completely fix and change your skin. And I know this is partly because we've been sold so many myths in the marketing of skincare down the years, that a product that you'll see advertised will really have life-changing properties, which it probably won't. But people still persist in thinking there's one thing, whereas, if you do the basics and keep your skin hydrated and protect it from the environment and give it a few stimulating ingredients to help it renew itself, that's sort of the best way forward. So I'd say no magic bullets.
Eye creams, for me, that's one of the areas where you have brands who claim that these eye creams will basically change your life and make your bed and take your dog for a walk. They do absolutely everything. And I find a lot of them are so lacking. And for a long time, actually, I haven't recommended eye creams because I just couldn't. I couldn't legitimately recommend them because I didn't believe that they did what they claimed to do. And so many out there on the market still don't do what they claim to do. So what are you saying about eye creams?
Well, like you, I tend to go back and forth on it, but I don't always bother with eye creams for myself. But then along will come an eye cream with some great research behind it and a bunch of really impressive ingredients. And it will say, in this trial, this many women saw this much of an improvement. And I'll think, right, okay, that is well worth giving it a go. Or it'll be from a cosmeceutical brand who have really researched the finished product as well as having some plausible ingredients in there. But I was given one to try just the other day, which drove me out the wall because it was called something like Instant Eye Lift, which of course, we know it absolutely won't be. Plus, it didn't really do anything. And I used it diligently on one side of my face for a month and one eye for a month. And that kind of thing makes me so cross because women are very susceptible to persuasive marketing messages. We just are. And when something says instant eye lift, you tend to think, oh, I might as well give it a go. On my website, I provide lots of information about treatments and skincare and great practitioners and how to stay safe in all this. And I've got a few products which I really do think make a difference. And there are 2 eye creams I've allowed in there. And that's because they really are ones that can prove they do give good results. But and the other, you've got to use it properly. I'm sure you've read Caroline Harron's book as well. It just made me roar out loud with laughter when I saw her thing about eye cream, saying you don't put it on after everything else, otherwise it's like wearing your bra outside your clothes. You've got to put it on first, which you'd think would be obvious, but we need reminding of things like that. So you put your eye cream on first, you then put the other things on. You also with any product that's supposed to be making a change in the skin, you've got to use it like medicine. I think you've got to use it as directed. If it says twice a day, every day, then you do that. You don't use it just when you feel like it on certain days of the week. So eye cream, I do now usually use an eye cream, but I know exactly where you're coming from with the promises that some of them make and the little amount that they deliver.
So we're all at home at the moment and can't have and don't have any access to getting facials done or getting any kind of treatments. And I know a lot of people have been looking for home facial gadgets. I'd love to know which ones you recommend.
It depends on what you're trying to do with your face, as ever, but I really like microcurrent. That's a sort of gadget like the New Face. Do you know that one, which it's got sort of silver bobbles on the end and it passes a low level electrical current between them, so it just tones up the muscles in your face very slightly, and you need to do it quite a lot, but it also helps with the circulation in the face and lymph drainage and stuff. So that is good if you're going to commit to using it. I like it because on a tired morning, it can just pick my eyebrows up that fraction. And you see that happening in the mirror and think, oh yeah, that's better. That's okay. Now I'm awake. And I am not very good at using the radio frequency machine so much, but there's brands like Sensica, SensiLift is one, or the tripolar stop. And what radio frequency does is it heats up the collagen in your skin until it contracts just a little bit, and that heat damage, it's kind of controlled damage, it's not like a burn, and there are mechanisms in the device so you don't overheat your skin. That stimulates the production of new collagen, so that takes quite a long time and you have to keep moving it slowly around some small area of your face, but that is meant to give quite a good tightening and not exactly lifting but sort of tautening to the skin. So it's not going to get rid of saggy jowls, but it will tighten up the skin and make it that little bit brighter if you can stick with it. Actually, the one I've loved using, I was lent this kind of monster of a gadget over first lockdown, which was this light canopy, an LED light therapy canopy from Dermalux, who are like gold standard manufacturers of LED light devices. So it's really a clinical piece of kit. You know, it's medically proven to help things like psoriasis and acne and joint injuries. But just lying under that, which I dutifully did most days of the week for about 3 months, and then I went and had my skin analysed with a Visia imaging system afterwards, and it had knocked 9 years off my face during lockdown, which I was pretty impressed by, because normally it takes an awful lot of aggressive treatments to do that. So it's a 30-minute sort of lie under 30 minutes. There's red light, which stimulates collagen production in the skin and elastin, and there's near infrared light, which is very sort of anti-inflammatory, and together they should regenerate the skin from inside, improve its hydration, improve its spring and bounce. And I found I had fewer wrinkles, it had taken down redness in the skin, it had taken down pigmentation and age spots. There's a video on my Instagram about it. But that's £2,000 worth of kit, but it's something that you can use very easily. It's completely pain-free, and it's as good for spotty teenagers or people with knee injuries. I know all those technologies are colorblind, which is another sort of point in their favor.
A lot of people ask about lasers, but lasers are notoriously not great for darker skin tones. Are there any that you can recommend?
Not for home use. I'd be really cautious of using any kind of home use laser, but because of the possible complications around provoking hyperpigmentation, I'd be really cautious about that.
If you could distill great efficacious skincare into like a really minimal regime, what would you put in there? What would be the mainstays? What would be the non-negotiables?
Okay, well, I think you could probably get away with 4, preferably 5 products. I'd say 1 product, sunscreen. Just wear sunscreen. A moisturizing sunscreen used daily will do you more good than anything else, because it will defend your skin from immediate damage from light, boring old ultraviolet in daylight, not necessarily sunlight, and it'll protect against future damage, and it'll give your skin that opportunity to help recover itself while you're wearing it. So that's your daytime non-negotiable. I'd like it next if you would buy a cleanser, a decent cleanser, so that you're not cleansing your face with shampoo in the shower, or that it's just getting a splash of water in the morning. That used at the end of the day would get off your sunscreen and any dirt, sweat, pollution, bacteria, whatever else has picked up on your face during the day. After the cleanser, I'd say the next thing is something with retinol or another retinoid. That's something else in the family of vitamin A derivatives for nighttime use, because that will really regenerate the skin. And if you're younger and you've got oily skin, it will manage that oiliness. And if you're older and your skin cell turnover is slowing down, it will improve that. It will help with the evenness of pigmentation in your skin. It will help with the smoothness of your skin. So that is a really great product. You might only want to use that twice a week, particularly when you're starting with it, and it might make your skin dry. So the fourth product would be a moisturizer, because you could use that in the morning, you could use it after the retinoid at night, and it doesn't have to be moisturizer if you hate moisturizer and you've got a skin that's a bit oilier, which mine still is, I find, even after all these years. You might want a hydrating serum, but hydration is really, really important to the proper functioning of the skin. The last thing I'd want to add in would be an antioxidant serum, maybe a vitamin C serum, because that is a really good defense for your skin against the world, against free radicals, these unstable molecules that accelerate aging processes in the skin. So with those 5 products, you would then cleanse in the morning, use your antioxidant serum, maybe hydrating serum or moisturizer, and sunscreen. And then in the evening, you've got your retinoid for some nights, you've got your vitamin C for other nights, or just the moisturizer. Moisturizer can go on after both. And there you go. That's it. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It's not rocket science. And I know, because in the magazines and whatnot, we can all go on about 10-step procedures, and we're always talking about the kind of twiddly bits around the edges of skincare, as it were. But the fundamentals are quite straightforward. Keep it clean, keep it comfortable and hydrated, nudge it into functioning a bit better with some active ingredients. There you go. That's all you need.
Alice, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's wonderful having you on.
Oh, Funmi, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight talking to you.
And that's it for this week. My thanks to Tamsin O'Connor, Alice Hart-Davis, my brand partner Sunday Riley, and you for listening to On Reflection.